Hello and welcome from Singapore. We are at Innofest Unbound, an event which brings together startups and corporates and dives into everything from smart cities to entrepreneurship to artificial intelligence. And I'm sitting with three dynamic and successful founders of companies, entrepreneurs themselves, who are going to be imparting wisdom and knowledge on how they did it, how they took their idea from concept to full-fledged business. So let's get right to it. Shaul Olmert, who is CEO and co-founder of Playbuzz, and we have Steve Heloish, who is co-founder of Property Guru, and Malcolm Rodriguez, CEO of My Republic. Let's get right to it. Let's dive right in. Millions of college graduates are going to be entering the workforce this month. Is it still the time to go into a startup?
It's always the time to go into a startup, and thank God that the great entrepreneurs of the world never asked themselves that question before they started a business. There are always excuses of why it's not the right time, but it always is.
Love it.
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar. For me, it's always a good time to be an entrepreneur. If you want to meet some really interesting people, you want to have a big impact on a business, and you want to have a crazy time, but learn one hell of a lot, then why not? It's been great for me.
Yeah, let me start off by answering. I think everybody should do a startup. I think it just completely changes how you view life. Whether you start off when you first finish school or whether you do it when you're 40 years old, it's never too late. I encourage people as young as possible to look at doing it. If you come out of school and don't have experience or don't really know what your area of interest is, go into the workforce. But if you do, if you have an idea, and that's the best time to start doing it, because you're going to fail. You're going to fail 3 times before you're successful. So do it early, get it out of the way, and keep going.
Of course, doing a startup is easier said than done. Most of you have backgrounds in corporates. You worked at Viacom, you worked for a corporation for a while. Tell me about when you knew, Steve, that it was time to leave the corporate job and go into your own idea.
Yeah, I spent about 11 or 12 years in corporate, in those days in a telecoms market, and it was very, very exciting, and I was helping build different businesses. The markets were liberalizing, and it was great fun. But towards the end, sort of dot-com boom and bust happened, and a lot of my clients were going into Chapter 11 and going bankrupt. And I ended up having built a few businesses inside the corporate, having to dismantle those, and I found that hugely frustrating. And I took 6 months out. I went traveling around Southeast Asia, fell in love with Asia, and came back and said, look, what do I really like doing? I like building. I like building businesses. I don't like dismantling. I also have more control over my destiny, and being an entrepreneur allows you to at least control things a little bit better. So so I decided at that point. So that was 2003, 2004 when I decided to make the switch, and I started my business then.
So you sort of took a break. You took a little eat, pray, love for yourself, and sort of reset on life, reset on career. Is that when the idea of Property Guru came to you, or had this been percolating for a while? And what did you really contemplate during those 6 months?
Well, the 6 months was life-changing for different reasons. We were backpacking, dollar a day, places we're staying at, and we saw extreme poverty. We went to hill tribes and we saw families who were having 15 kids. 2 of them were surviving just because of malnutrition or bad water. And that really set a kind of a level ground for me in terms of look, there's a big world out here, and there's a lot of people who are living in very, very poor circumstances and those kind of things. So that was a big change. But the actual circumstances for Property Guru, it was born out of frustration. I was renting a property in Singapore. The property market in Singapore exploded, and I had to move out of the place I was renting within 2 weeks because a developer had bought the whole property. And the first thing I did in high-tech Singapore was to go online and start looking. And to my surprise, there was nothing online. It was still very antiquated. People were using the newspapers, 3 lines of text, whether you're an advertiser or a consumer. And for me, trying to find out about the property market, having to rely on that was just hugely frustrating. And so I started to research a little bit more and looked at Southeast Asia, and 600 million people, growing by about 7 or 8 million every single year, moving from the villages into the cities. Middle class is rising, and of course, as property as an asset class is number 1. So it's born out of personal frustration, but also, having researched it, $150 billion market, ready for disruption, and technology was the enabler for that. So I pitched it to an investor friend of mine, and he introduced me to my co-founder, and we started the business in 2007.
Joel, how about you? You worked in a corporate for a long time. You sort of made the rounds in New York City. You still live in New York City. When did you know it was time to go and start Playbuzz?
So, I wasn't one of these guys that were born entrepreneurs and always, had their own independent way. Actually, I was a very happy corporate soldier for a while. And then things started going wrong for me. I was pretty successful in my early career, and then I stopped being successful, and I realized that not everything, I don't have the Midas touch, and not everything I'm doing, turns to gold. And I was really frustrated with a couple of jobs that didn't really work out, and kind of like maybe suffering an early midlife crisis, as they call it. And out of this, time in which I was very personally insecure, and I just didn't know what I'm good at anymore and what I want to do, came this idea that I said, wow, wouldn't it be great if people were creating content that is more playful, more engaging, using data in order to create content experience that are more appealing to people. And when I came up with this idea, nobody encouraged me. Nobody thought it was a good idea. Not a single person that I shared the idea with told me I should go for it. Everybody said, yeah, it's like it's an okay idea, but not great. And at a certain point, I realized, and I don't know if that was your experience too, that even though nobody backs me up on that, nobody encourages me, I'm still obsessed with this idea. And at some point, I said, you know what? I'm doing it. I mean, I've just got. The only way to get out of my system is just to go out and try. And I think at that point, the company was poised for success. In the moment in which you do something, just because you truly believe in it, and you're saying, I'm willing to go all the way and potentially fail with it because, I actually really believe that it could work.
Malcolm, you talked about, giving the advice that it's important to fail, it's okay to fail. Did you have your own set of failures before landing on MyRepublic?
Very similar to Steve. I'd started 3 telcos inside bigger companies. So a cable company that wanted to get into telco in the 90s, a company that expanded in Asia out of the US, and then the NBN business in Singapore. And so you kind of go through it, and you kind of get a bit of the building, the accomplishment of every day is successful. In each of those circumstances, we tried. We have inside MyRepublic, we have we do something called an innovation renovation every 3 months, and we sit down and we assume everything we've done is wrong, and that we got to reinvent ourselves because competition is coming. And people sort of said, "Oh, how do you guys move so quickly? Doesn't the analysis kill you guys?" And we pretty much flip coins. Our view on decision making is do it. And if it's not working, stop doing it and do something else, as opposed to sitting there and overanalyzing it. So through that process, you make mistakes, but you need a culture and an environment of allowing it to happen, allowing people to try and fail, and you move much, much faster by doing that.
This is actually a lot of fun because usually people don't talk about failing or about mistakes, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you interview someone for a job and you go through their resume and then you ask them, oh, why did you leave this great company, whatever? Why did you join Facebook and left after 4 months? And they would always say, oh, I realized that, Facebook is not, really rich on data, so I look. No, you didn't. You're just like it was a misfit, or you got laid off, or whatever. And people never admit it.
Yeah.
And I really like the fact that that's sitting here talking about what made you successful. Is really about the fact that first you failed, and then you try to figure out why is it that you failed, and what is it that you could be successful at. And as long as people are always like busy covering up and polishing up and trying to make everything look so shiny and perfect, they're just not true to themselves and they'll never get anywhere. The moment you realize that it's okay to fail, and by the way, who knows if we don't have any more failures lined up for us in our future as well. Yeah. As long as you're open to that and you're still willing to try, you actually have a chance of making it.
How important nowadays is location? Because obviously with Property Guru, you want to be in Singapore if that's your market, and same thing with MyRepublic. You're in a number of markets, but with a company like Playbuzz, you can almost run it remotely, right? If you wanted to run it from Bali.
I think it's a very personal choice. Technology is there. One of my best buddies, Paul Berry, started a great company called Rebel Mouse. And even though the company continues to grow, he recently shut down their office, and now they're all working remotely. So he sits in his home office, with his wife, and they each run their business from home. And all of his employees, he has dozens of employees all over the world. They probably never met each other. They all work remotely and it works for them. I'm the exact opposite. I'm trying to be in all of our locations around the world at the same time. So, I'm flying like crazy. I really need the personal touch, the face-to-face. That's just my style. But I guess, technology really enables you to go both ways. And it's really a matter of personal preferences and personal management style, I guess.
Yeah. I think it also depends on the business as well. I mean, so in my case, we're across 5 markets, all in Southeast Asia, and we travel every week. You spend 2 or 3 days per week in the markets, and it's important, I think, because in the markets that we operate in, it's ASEAN is 10 different countries with different cultures, different stages of economic development, and require a different approach. And property is a very personal thing. And also, just in terms of building the business and the culture of the business in each of the markets, it's important to be there. So I'm kind of similar. I'm traveling a lot because that's kind of how I like to be, because I like to see it on the ground. I like to live and breathe it. I like to see the team, but also talk to the clients and hear from the clients and hear what the challenges are on the ground, because they're different in every single market. So I think if you are running maybe a pure e-commerce business, maybe you could run everything remotely. But when you start to talk a little bit around physical stuff, or you have your clients on the ground, it's a little bit different.
In person.
Yeah.
It's often said, your number one asset of a business is your human capital, right? Your employees. You'll also hear a lot of horror stories about millennials, right? Millennials coming into the workforce. What is it that you particularly like or dislike, or advice you would give when hiring and looking for new employees, specifically new to the workforce?
Wow, we could have a whole show about that. There are definitely many challenges when it comes to working with younger people. I think there's a generational gap which is obvious. And I think that, I really admire the sort of approach of millennials. There was a big riot now about, I don't know if you guys were exposed to the whole series of viral videos called Why I Left BuzzFeed, in which many people that used to work for BuzzFeed, which is a great company, left it for whatever reasons, and then they were going public about why they left the company. And you could think that this would be horror stories, but when you listen, they say stuff like, I left BuzzFeed because I created a lot of very successful videos for them, and those videos belong to them and not to me, and I think it's wrong. And you're like, I kind of admire the fact that millennials are not taking crap from anybody, and they kind of feel like they have the, if they're talented, they're entitled to capitalize on their talent, and they capitalize to do things their own way. And the individual contributor is much less dependent on the organization than they used to be. I mean, back in the old days when I started working for MTV, I was just so grateful for the opportunity to join this, big company, big brand, and learn a lot. And I still think it was a great experience. But today, if you're talented, you have everything at your fingertips. You can really run a business from your little mobile phone. It's all in your pocket. So they're not really dependent on it. And people that do have the entrepreneurial urge, I think they should just, go out and try. And, if they feel like they can gain a lot from joining a big corporate, then that's great too. But if they do have the urge and they do have the vision and do have the, the sort of idea and the, the itch to go out and do it, there really is no reason why they shouldn't try it.
So when you do your hiring, what is that big question that is going to make or break this candidate, or what's the quality you look for?
I'll tell you, I'm always surprised by how some of the people that I hired and I knew they're going to be a home run turned out to be a bust, and vice versa. It's honestly really hard, because I feel like people are always exploring. They're not very sure about their long-term career objectives. Most people are not the classic type, like us. We graduated from college, we then started a career, and we said, what's the best next stop in my career in order to get me to where I want to go. I feel like millennials are more about what do I feel like doing right now, what's going to make me happy, what's going to be fun, what's going to be inspiring.
How good
and then
is the free lunch
and if that changes 2 weeks later, then they'll move on to something else. And I actually admire that. I think it's a great way to live.
And the millennial culture exists because of where technology is today. It really, and it's why it's the great time to do a startup. You have cloud technology. You have the access to infrastructure, to server technology. You could sit in your mother's basement, have a 1 gig connection to Amazon Cloud, code an app, launch it without ever leaving home. You could actually kind of build those businesses, and you don't spend a lot of money doing it. There's also enablement tools. So people that are building these services and apps, enable other people to take those services and apps and actually build their businesses and build their online travel shows. I love millennials because it's a dawn of a new age. You know, it's a representation of where society is and where society is going, and it's about self-expression. It's about individuality. You know, we have this concept. It's called mass individualization. And when we look at broadband, before we would sell services, and it was one for all. And now you can customize a product or a service for everybody. There's no need to group you. So when you talk about segmentation, you can segment to the unit of one, and that's what the world is coming, and that's what gives you the greatest opportunity to build businesses and start companies that can challenge the large service providers of the past.
So, fairly optimistic outlook on millennials, but Steve, do you agree? I mean, do you think that they're easy to manage? Do you think they're easy to hire? You know, even though you're saying they're very restless, like, what's your take, and what do you look for when you hire?
Well, I guess the reality is millennials are here, right? So you can't avoid millennials. And you know, the millennials that we have in our organisation are the powerhouse of the company. They're probably the most creative. They're probably the most disruptive in a positive kind of way. They're ones that are challenging the norm. You know, so I think, you know, businesses need to adapt. You know, you can't sit here and, you know, we all complain about millennials are a pain to manage and are difficult to manage. Some of them are, yes, absolutely. But also without them, our business would not be where it is today, and would also not be where it is in the future. I just think we need to adapt to how they work. And that's what we do, you know, so we have more flexible working, we have a slightly different performance review structure which recognises them more frequently and more often, you know, more flexible in terms of coming in and out of the office. The office environment has completely and utterly changed over the last 3 or 4 years to cater to that, so people can come in and sit wherever they want. No one has got a desk, including the CEO and everyone down. And so this is all important. I mean, you can't fight it. It's here. So you work with it and you nurture and encourage. And so we look for people who are going to, you know, who want to challenge and are willing to be a bit creative, and you work with those individuals.
You know, as CEOs, we got a lot on our minds. You know, we have to deal with a lot. So whenever a new crisis comes up, we're not like, oh yeah, a crisis. This is really going to, you know, shake my perspective on my business and teach me things I didn't know. So when an employee comes to me and says, you know, I want to leave because of X, Y, Z, it's not like I'm saying, oh yay, but it's hard. Nonetheless, you know, when that happens, sometimes whether the employee ends up leaving or staying, that dialogue is like part of, you know, maybe one of the most important parts of my work, because, you know, I'm trying to build a business in an era that is ruled by them, you know, by the younger people, and I'll never be able to, you know, even though, you know, we get along just fine, I'll never be able to view the world as with the same fresh of eyes that they do. So, you know, they really highlight stuff to you. They're saying, you know, I want to leave the company because this and that is wrong. And then you're asking yourself, you know, is it wrong? You know, why do they assume it's wrong? You know, what are they expecting? And, you know, maybe there's a learning here for me. And as long as you're open to that, you can really, you know, you can really have a meaningful dialogue with your employees.
And how has it changed you as a person, as an entrepreneur who runs a business, you know, over the course of the past few years? Is there something you look for differently now when you hire, or is there a different approach you have to managing?
I think I recently saw someone quoted of saying that it used to be that in the sales cycle, in media sales cycle, you had someone selling, and then you had an account manager, and then you had an ad ops guy that's doing the tech stuff. And she said, you know what, I can do all of that. It's like I can like talk to a client and engage on a deal and then work with them throughout the creative process of making the deal happen, and make sure that I, you know, put out all the fires and everything that's going on. And it's like, you know, why have a whole team of people when you can have just one person do that and take a few accounts and then create a team of people who is, you know, using sort of a more multidisciplinary approach. I think that's a lot of the millennial stories. It's about, you know, broad skill set. It's about not limiting them, not try to push them into a box, not try to say, hey, once you go to college, you decide on a profession, and this is what you're going to do the rest of your life, and this is what you're going to be good at, because the world is changing so fast that if you acquire a certain skill set, that skill set may be irrelevant in a couple of years. So you want people who are, you know, open-minded, who are up to the challenge, who relate to your vision, and then they kind of like grow and evolve with you. Most of my senior management have switched roles by now, at least once. And I love that. It's like we just like, instead of hiring a new head of marketing recently, We took an internal person that knows nothing about marketing, and we said it's easier to immerse her in the tactics of marketing than to get someone from the outside who may be a marketing guru but doesn't know crap about Playbuzz. And we took that attachment that she has to the company and build off of that.
This is the beauty, I think, also of startups as well, because the world is moving so fast. Startups are inherently more risk-taking and more dynamic. 65% of kids in school today are going to be in jobs that don't even exist because the world's moving so fast, right? And so startups also have to move fast, and I think it offers this opportunity for millennials to come in and see different roles. We have similar sort of stories in Property Guru where people have joined us and have had 4 or 5 different roles, completely different functions. One person who joined customer services, moved into sales, then ended up running the sales in one country to another country, and then to a third country. Not only has he had different functions and different levels, but he also has had 3 different countries to operate in. And that, startups enable that, whereas as corporates inherently are more about managing risk and probably struggle with it a little bit more than startups do.
Yeah, it's a good point. My daughter graduated 2 years ago, and I said in Vancouver, and I said, "So what are you going to do?" And she goes, "Oh, I'm going to look for a job." And 6 months later, I said, "Okay, you know what? I'm starting up New Zealand. Go to New Zealand, spend 6 months there." She was there. She ended up spending about 1.5 years there, and she was in marketing, which I thought was the thing she'd love to do. She hated it. She did sales. She did HR. She did finance. And she kind of came out of it and said, "You know what, I want to get a master's in HR." And I thought, completely didn't expect it, but she kind of had that. So I think one of the things with millennials is why they're kind of a bit free-spirited. They also have lacks in direction, and sometimes maybe going into a smaller business lets them explore and understand what kind of makes them tick. So I think that's also, from an advice perspective, something that's good.
That changes all of the business dynamics, because in traditional business it used to be about, let's see what works and then set it in stone, like set a process because we know it works, and then all we need to do is replicate and scale it. And now it's less about that, it's more about let's always remind ourselves who we are, what we are here for, why are we in business, what is it that makes us unique, what is the, they used to call it corporate values or whatever. I don't believe in writing a set of values on the wall anymore. It's really about what are the things that makes us unique, and then continue to innovate and find new ways to bring. The tactics are constantly changing. The environment is constantly changing. Brands used to be all about getting as many Facebook likes as they could. Then it turns out that that's no longer an asset. Then it was about, let's generate as many video views as possible, and at some point they figured that 6 seconds of average viewing time on Facebook doesn't really mean much. So you always have to teach yourself new tools and new tactics. But if you really have a mission, and if you really, you really know what you're about, and you're able to establish a dialogue with your employees in which, we all know what we're trying to do and what we're trying to solve for, then the tactics evolve, but, the employees stay.
So how do you keep things fresh? Malcolm was saying earlier how they disrupt themselves at their company. Do you take that time once a month and, do a company hands-on retreat, or how do you make sure you're...
I'm not a very structured guy in my orientation. I'm less about, I did work in corporate America and I did go to grad school, so, I guess I can do that, but it's not my tendency. It's less about formal rules. It's more about every time we pick something new, we're saying, it's whatever, a couple of months ago, we called a company hackathon in which we invited all of the employees, 150 people from all over the world. It was we spent a ridiculous amount of money on this, but we thought it was time to bring everybody together and then, have them create and innovate and compete with innovation with each other. And then the grand prize for the winning team was that they could choose any Playbuzz office around the world, fly to that office for a week in order to finish their project. And the winning team flew to Brazil. They just came back with a working product. So, I don't know that this is a structure that I'm going to replicate right now. That was me ad hoc responding to something that I felt was missing from our culture or from our day-to-day. And that's kind of my orientation. So I'm less about, finding schemas and replicate them, and more about just always asking myself, what should we do? Everything is open. We can call everything off. We can call everybody in. We can change the way we do things. Let's just try and figure out what is it that's right for us right now.
A lot of entrepreneurs and CEOs will talk about the importance of the morning routine, right? Waking up at a certain time and doing the routine. Steve, let's start with you. What is your morning routine?
I wish I could say I was that disciplined, having the same morning routine. I have a wish list of things I'd like to do, first of all, which is like 10 minutes of meditation, and then it's an hour of exercise. In reality, it kind of gets a bit screwed up, particularly when I'm traveling, kind of waking up at 5 and then you're kind of rushing to get out the door, get on the plane and this kind of thing. So I try to do it, and I try to spend a bit of time also with my kids, either in the morning or in the evening. No, I mean, I don't really have a solid routine. I'm not one of those kind of guys who's that disciplined about it.
Keep it flexible.
I keep it flexible. I have a wish list, but in reality, it kind of moves. So yeah.
A lot of it depends on what country you wake up in, and so I have a routine that I like, but I'm rarely at home, and I actually don't have a home anymore. I got a place in three different cities that I kind of live in, and but I think a lot of it is. Mornings for us are my busiest time. We have businesses in Australia and New Zealand, which are 4 or 5 hours ahead. So we start kind of dealing with that. So the routine for me is more at night. It's trying to kind of get home and have dinner with my wife and spend some time there and decompress. There's so much, you're bombarded with so much information. You just need to take a bit of time and say, okay, you know what, I just need to kind of settle it. So it ain't mornings are a disaster for me.
Likewise, I mean, I feel like structuring a routine is like trying to impose your idea on the world rather than respond to it. So I'm like just like this gentleman. I'm waking up every day in a some different hotel room in a different part of the world. It takes me 5 minutes to figure out where I am and why I got here, and then the rest of it is played by ear. It all depends on it. Sometimes I wake up and it's already like midday at one of my offices, and I'm like jumping right to it. Sometimes I'm waking up and I'm saying, I'm the only employee of Playbus that's awake right now, so I can do my own thing. It really depends. I think that again, it's not about structuring routines, business processes. It's about remembering what's important to you and always look at it with a fresh set of eyes to make sure that you find the right way to accomplish that.
Earlier, Shaul, you were saying that you had a lot of naysayers when you were debating diving from your corporate job into your startup.
Yeah.
Obviously, looking back, I would imagine you're happy you did that. But what in those first year or two, what were the what did you really learn from those biggest challenges? When I'm sure there were days that you just wanted to quit and give it up.
There still are. It's the reality of business is there's a lot of turbulence, and it's like one day I feel like my company is worth multi-billion dollars. The other day I have the most definitive evidence that it's worth nothing. And sometimes it happens 5 times in the same day. And this gentleman can relate, obviously. But I think going back to the early stage, it's like so I spoke about the moment in which you make the decision, you jump into the water. That's a defining moment. It's not the end of the story. There's still a lot of there are so many moments. You have to go through so much, but it's kind of like they always say that you can't experience true love unless your heart was broken at least once. I mean, it's like it's part of the experience. If you don't go through the hurdles, if you don't go through the time in which people doubt you, and sometimes you doubt as well, and you ask yourself questions, then you can't really reach the point where you're adamant and confident about what you do. So in the first 2 years or so, when I was so struggling to convince publishers, potential clients to work with our platforms, and nobody would, do it. Even people that were my friends, it's like they promised me they will, and sometimes somehow it never happened. And then when we were like close to running out of money in our last few dollars, we hired a person to start creating, to eat our own dog food, to start creating content with our own platforms. And we said, maybe now the world will see better examples and they'll get convinced. You know what, that didn't work, but what did work is that suddenly those creations in-house were started to be shared on Facebook and other places and became very viral. And before you knew it, 6 months later, we had 100 million people on our website. So that's when it happened. And that's when, I was thinking about all those naysayers and, I had a message to them. And the only way to get to that point is to just continue and struggle, not until you're close to your last dollars, but until you're over them.
Are you still
and
friends
sometimes
with
it did happen.
Are you still friends with those naysayers?
Yeah, forgive and forget. It's like, by the way, many times people come to me, entrepreneurs come to you for advice, and I'm telling them, you know what, your business idea, I don't see it. It's like, to me, it's like, I don't feel like it's a good idea, but I always say, listen, it's like, every entrepreneur heard it before. It's like you gotta, if you still believe in it, you gotta continue and you gotta continue and fight for it. So yeah, I don't take it personally, but it's definitely been one hell of an emotional roller coaster ride.
Well, great. I think we're going to leave it there. I think your last words with "don't take it personally" are probably the best to end on. So thank you so much. Again, we're here at InnoFest Unbound here in Singapore, and thank you guys so much for your time. Really enjoyed this awesome and incredible knowledge, and appreciate your time. Thanks so much. Thanks.
Still watching? Perfect. Click here to watch another great video from CNBC International. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.